and I love horse stunts. And even that, like, they're
Such a
not,
random thing to love.
love it. I love dudes falling off horses.
Someone's
I
like,
love
"Oh, we saw a
horses
great
falling.
movie. We saw a great movie this weekend. Are there any horse stunts?"
Yeah.
I'm like, no, they're not. All right, forget it.
Yes. Oh, God, yes! Welcome back to Is It Still Good? This is the show where we travel to the Middle East. We perform resurrections recklessly upon the people and culture of our past. And during these horrible rituals, we misplace our rose-colored glasses. So once they come to life, we are forced to deal with them without those glasses, with our shorn eyeballs, with an eye to the future and one foot in the grave. I'm Bear Kennedy in Chicago. I am one of two grown-up film students who hate growing up. Joining me today, as always,
You butchered that.
I did. I got through it. We just never stop. Do not stop. Do not stop.
You fucking loser. Andrew Carter, Los Angeles. Bear just got back from Austin. How was that?
It was good. It was good to be with some friends I haven't seen in a long time. It was good to be out at a bar in a state where science is low on the list, and the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ is way at the top. So it was an interesting experience.
But Austin is pretty high on science.
Austin's good. Austin is a good place. A great place to visit. Unimaginable living there, at least for me.
Why? Because of the heat?
The heat is bad. You know, you're surrounded by Texas, which is also bad. And it's kind of large and spread out, which is what I don't love in a city. But for a visit,
like LA.
Yeah, exactly, which I also hate.
Out.
So
yeah,
but a visit,
I don't mind it.
Wonderful. Yeah,
I feel like I'd dig it living there. Did you get barbecue? That's the question.
We
today.
did. We were out way the fuck out. We were on Lake Travis and not close to the city. Right. So we did end up getting Terry Black's.
I haven't had it, but I hear it's great.
It was good. It wasn't on the list you sent me, which I felt bad about, but it was delicious.
I hear it's great. I hear they have a good beef rib. Did you get the beef rib?
You know what? It takes a lot to get me into a beef rib, I'll be honest. I love pork ribs.
I do too. I prefer pork ribs.
That's interesting to know. I will not order a beef rib without a recommendation. I tend to not love them.
Yeah, I don't. It's funny. I don't love them either, but every time I've heard them like recommended, it's from these people that are like, but you haven't had a beef rib like this. And to be honest with you, I still think I haven't, because
I certainly haven't.
I still, like, the ones I've had, I'm kind of like, but I was told to get one at La Barbecue in Austin, and right before we went up to order, they put a sold out sign on them, which sucked. It was devastating.
Awful.
I was so mad. But I still haven't had like an incredible beef rib, and I heard the beef rib at Terry Black's is very good.
I could see that. Everything else was good.
Get?
I got brisket, which I asked for a burned end, and they had like the end of it, which was very, very good. Caramelized, wonderful. I tipped more than 20%, and I got
a nice gesture.
A couple of pork ribs. My issue with beef ribs is usually that they're not tenderized to my liking. And they can come out tougher, and I don't love that.
That's my issue too.
And so you got to know when it's time to take a risk. That could be a bad experience.
You do. But apparently at these two at Terry Black's and La Barbecue, they know how to make them tender.
Okay, well,
did you try Salt Lake in the airport? Did you get a chance to try Salt Lake?
I walked past it, obviously, coming and going. I got in really late at night, so they were closed, and on the way out, I'd just eaten Terry Black's. But you were right; it's right there.
Yeah,
I kind of want to go to the spot and see the pits and shit.
I do too.
It seems like an experience, and so next time.
It's in Driftwood, which I guess is like a little bit north of Austin. I don't know if that was near where you guys were, but
no, we looked at it. It was a haul, and then it's from where we were, at least, to get there and then to the airport to leave would have been a whole ordeal. So
yeah, it's not super convenient, which is why I was like, what I can do at least, because I was there for South by Southwest, I was like, what I can at least do is just get the food here. The experience will be missed. But I had that at Franklin. Like, I went to Franklin, I waited in line, I ate there, and it was the best. And I'm so glad I had that experience. I literally missed a filmmaker meetup to go do that, and I don't regret it at all.
No,
like,
it's a great
not even a little bit. Like, yeah. I look, filmmaker meetups are fun, getting to meet other filmmakers, I love it, but like, I knew there were going to be more of those opportunities, and I was right. I was 100% right. I did the right thing. There were other opportunities. I met everyone that I was going to meet anyway, and I still got to have Franklin, which I was fucking thrilled about. There's
a line a couple of years, like within the last 10 years or so, there's a line in that Baz Luhrmann song about sunscreen from the 90s. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
All right, it was on, like, I think the original Now That's What I Call Music compilation.
Baz Luhrmann, like the filmmaker Baz Luhrmann?
Yeah, he had like a top 40 hit that was called like the Sunscreen song. Yeah. Okay, so I'll explain it first, but it's like it's in the form of a commencement speech. It's not really a song. There's like a beat, but he's like talking through it. And I don't know why, but I heard that song for some reason. And there's a line in the middle of it where he's like, this isn't going to be verbatim, but he says something about don't let the burdens of time and money ever hold you back from spending moments with your friends. Like, it's easy to let that shit get in the way, and don't do that. I will put myself through extreme time and financial hardship for my friends and also food. Like that, just no question asked. Like, I don't care. And I don't know why, but I just heard that lyric, and it just, I don't know, it changed how I felt about stuff. And I think I like texted my best buddy right away. I was like, hey, let's get together.
It's amazing.
It's a weird line, but I don't know. It just hit me at the right time of life. I remember hearing that song when I was like 12 and being like, this shit is so much more boring than the rest of what's on this now. That's what I call music. But that song was not for a 12-year-old boy.
Right. It's aged well with you.
It's for a 30-year-old man.
Yeah, and also, at the end of the day, experiences are kind of all we have in terms of what we've done with our lives, and you want to be able to say that you did interesting stuff. And again, when I think about that trip to South by, the whole thing was amazing, but one of the highlights was absolutely going to Franklin, if not the highlight. Yeah. I don't know about the highlight, because we got to, playing our short film in the Alamo Draft House and getting a nice applause was pretty incredible. But but the Franklin barbecue is amazing. And speaking of movies that get applauses, we are coming to you 20 years from May 2001, which is when these two movies that we're going to talk about were the reigning champs of the box office in the early months of May. The Mummy Returns and A Knight's Tale. The Mummy Returns opened on May 4th. A Knight's Tale opened on May 11th. Counter-programming for sure. And what's interesting is that I think in my head I was like, yeah, it's counter-programming, but I guess I was like, both are kind of PG-13 action things, right, on paper. So I was like, all right, they're probably like, maybe it's the same demographic. Not at all. not even close to the same demographic in terms of their target. But I can definitely see how The Mummy Returns play, and it did at the time. I think it played like a 4-quadrant movie. And A Knight's Tale definitely geared towards teenage girls who were, fawning over Heath Ledger. This was his big solo, name above the title outing. Because this was, 10 Things I Hate About You made him a huge star. And then he had he's great in that movie. And then it had, then he had The Patriot with Mel Gibson, where he played his son. Yep. And that was another nice like bit of exposure. And then the next year is A Knight's Tale. So first, let's talk about The Mummy Returns, since that opened first.
Okay.
Did you see this movie in theaters?
No, I don't know what happened, but for some reason, like, all my friends went to see this movie and I missed it.
That's interesting.
It was. It's tough to piece together like your week by week schedule from when you're 12 years old, but I must have been doing something. I don't know. I missed it, and I caught this like on DVD way later. It must have been like a sleepover or something. But I do remember being really thrilled to see it, not seeing it in the theater, and then seeing it way after and being less thrilled.
Yeah, I saw it. I remember vividly when it came out because
I remember when it came out pretty hard.
First of all, it was marketed heavily.
Yes. Yeah, and when you're that age, you're really susceptible to like, oh, this is going to be a big, like, I have to see The Mummy Returns. How can I show up at school? Yeah.
Exactly. And I remember May 4th, 2001, my mom worked with this woman who had a box at Madison Square Garden. And we went there a few times, and one of the times we went there actually was to, dude, this is amazing. This was January of '99. We went there for a WWF wrestling match. Ended with, we should talk about wrestling one episode. It ended with a 4-person, I don't know if it was a cage match or whatever, but it was Undertaker, Mankind, Stone Cold, and The Rock. And Stone Cold, of course, won.
Yes.
It was legendary. I'll never forget it. We got Austin 316 bandanas. It was amazing. But on May 4th, 2001, we went there to go see a Knicks game. The Knicks were playing the Raptors. And I remember all I wanted to do was see The Mummy Returns. Yeah. There were posters for it on every fucking corner. I had been waiting for it. And I didn't even want to be at the game. I was like, I really want to see this movie. And I knew that wasn't going to happen. And I knew I wasn't going to be like, well, maybe we won't have to go to the game and we can see the movie. But I know that in the back of my head, I remember driving into the city. I remember seeing the posters, and I remember thinking, that's all I want to do. I don't give a shit about this basketball game. And that was probably the first time I realized, oh, I don't care about sports. And I never will. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, dude, we're going to a box at Madison Square Garden. I saw Vince Carter play. He was on the Raptors at the time. Yeah. And I was like, I don't care. I just didn't care. And so I don't remember the first time. I saw it very soon after that, probably the next weekend. But I saw it twice in theaters. I remember I saw it once with my dad. And
you just wanted to make sure you got all the plot points in.
Yeah.
Had to see it
and I saw it probably like a month or so later with this woman who was like tutoring me for not college yet, because I was in like 6th grade. But
Egyptology.
Yeah, no. She was like, I think like an academic private counselor, because I wasn't a good student. But there would be times when she was like, part of her thing was like, we'll do some working, but like every once in a while, I'll take your kid to like go see a movie or go do something that they want to do. So it's kind of like a trust thing. And so one time she took me to see The Mummy Returns. And the other time she took me to see Evolution, which we'll talk about in a future episode. But I remember vividly seeing it. I loved it as a kid. It was and then it was the first DVD I bought in around Christmas of 2001, because we finally got a DVD player. We didn't have one. And I remember we went to, it was either Best Buy or Circuit City. I think it was actually Circuit City. And I bought
R.I.P.
Yeah, R.I.P. I still go to Best Buy. I love it. I bought The Mummy Returns. I bought Jurassic Park 3. It was like the summer of Universal movies. They were all huge. But the biggest thing that stood out to me was I hadn't seen The Mummy in full. I just knew that The Mummy Returns was going to be huge. And I think I had like caught parts of The Mummy on TV, but I didn't see it. And so I had like no context for The Mummy Returns. I just knew like big action movie from my favorite studio that did Jurassic Park. I'm in. So before I watched The Mummy Returns this time, I went back and rewatched, because I had seen The Mummy, but I hadn't seen it in years. I went back and rewatched The Mummy. Did you get a chance to rewatch The Mummy before The Mummy Returns?
Not this time, but you are in luck that the entire plot of The Mummy Returns is contained within its title, so that it's not that hard to follow. But I remember, like you, spent a ton of time in Best Buy, and one of the things that they would do would be to have like sample shit happening to entice you to buy stuff. So they'd have like DVD players and TVs and shit set up. And the ones I remember, like it happened yesterday, they had a loop of the scene in Jurassic Park where they walk into the Welcome Center and walk up the stairs.
Yeah.
It just, no other action. I don't know why they chose that scene. And then the other one they used to show, scene? I have no idea. But the other one they used to show is the scene from The Mummy where Imhotep turns his face into a sandstorm and tries to eat a plane. And they just played that constantly.
I get them playing.
I get that too. You want to show off the visual? Yeah, like, oh, it's crazy.
Of course. It's a good scene.
And I think that's what eventually got me to see the original Mummy, which was one of the probably first 5 to 10 DVDs I ever bought when I as soon as I got a PlayStation 2, because it had a DVD player built in.
Right.
So that was the genesis of me starting to buy a lot of DVDs. But I didn't watch it this time. I feel pretty familiar with that movie, even though I haven't seen it in a while.
Dude, I forgot how unfamiliar I was with it, and I got to tell you, and we'll get into The Mummy Returns in a second, but this is just for The Mummy. Definitely still good for me. The action was great. And not only that, I was like, this is really entertaining. This feels like a throwback. This feels like Indiana Jones meets Lawrence of Arabia.
Yes.
And on top of it, and I've probably talked about this on the show before, a good action movie to me is when you know the geography, and you know the geography in The Mummy. And not only that, it's surprisingly contained. It's all in the desert, and they're kind of going back and forth. But on top of it, it's like, it feels huge. It's this big scope. It reminded me of, how I talk about the geography in Die Hard, how it's like, where everything is in that building, and it feels huge, even though it's, essentially just in this quote-unquote one location. And The Mummy felt somewhat similar. It's like in the desert in these tombs, and that's kind of it. And I was just really impressed.
It does, and it gives you that adventure Indiana Jones vibe. It's obviously borrowing heavily from it, but it's like those two movies. I'd say plus Terminator 2, because it is a little heavier on the action than either Lawrence of Arabia, and potentially I think it was just a different time for Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones, there's a lot of non-action in that movie.
Right.
But it's all very good.
But Brendan Fraser playing, Rick O'Connell, this like archaeological expert and adventurer and everything, that was the definitely the Indiana Jones vibes and stuff. And I gotta say, man, Brendan Fraser is great. And he gets a bad rap because the internet likes making fun of him.
No, he gets a bad rap because he was blacklisted for being sexually assaulted.
Yeah, which is bullshit. And and that guy's now expelled from the HFPA, and fuck him.
That's a really sad story, actually.
It's really
Brendan
sad.
Fraser should have a much better career.
He's great. He's a really good actor, and not only first of all, anybody who's watches the show The Affair on Showtime, I've actually only watched the first, I think, 3 seasons, maybe a little bit of 4. But Brendan Fraser's in season 3. He has a season-long arc, and he is really good. Really good.
Surprise me. Yeah,
and it's completely different than what he did in The Mummy and The Mummy Returns. First of all, it shows his range, and I mean, again, he's a really fucking good actor. He's really good, and I think he's underrated. I think people sleep on him, and he's got such charm and charisma in this. And yeah, some of the lines in these movies are kind of eye-rolly, but he delivers them with gusto, and he believes them. Like in The Mummy Returns, when he's like, "You lighten up, you big trouble, you get in the car." I was like, "Yeah, I'm in." Like, this guy rules.
He has a Nicolas Cage ability to commit to the role, and so you buy him. Even if you don't buy the material, you buy him. I mean, he gets a big pass for me for Airheads, which is a movie I just love.
I've actually never seen Airheads.
We will slate that up for the show.
We got to slate that up.
He's not. Unless he gets cast in a Tarantino movie, late career, he's not going to have probably an awards-worthy role. But he's a solid guy. He can carry an action movie. He's actually has great comedy chops.
Yeah, really good comedy chops.
I like him in both movies. I think that was a good bit of casting. I kind of can't imagine anyone else in the role. Not that Rick O'Connell is like so iconic that you're always thinking.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? Rick O'Connell. I don't think Rick O'Connell is iconic, but Brendan Fraser in these movies is.
He's great.
That's what I think. I think Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, they're both iconic.
Rachel Weisz, legendary hotness, amazing actress who I always get excited to see.
Yeah, she's beautiful.
Arnold Vosloo, also incredible casting. Just
Arnold
a dude
Vosloo,
who looks awesome shirtless.
Oded Fehr, Patricia. I remember. You know why I remember all the names? Because this was one of the. I feel like this is maybe the first and honestly like maybe only time since where in the Mummy Returns trailer, I remember the guy's voice announcing every big character, every big actor's name in the movie. Even if you didn't know who it was, I remember it was Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz, John Hannah, Arnold Vosloo, Oded
we're
Fehr,
out of steam already there.
Patricia Velasquez introducing Freddie Both as the kid, and then it was and The Rock as the Scorpion King. And I bet you the fact that The Rock was in it was part of why they did that. Part of the lead up.
Yeah, 100%. And I knew The Rock from wrestling.
Of course,
maybe you did as well. But that was a big deal. Now you think of him as maybe Dwayne The Rock Johnson, if you think of The Rock at all.
Yeah, a lot of people
probably think of him as Dwayne Johnson.
Right, yeah.
But it's interesting that him making the crossover from wrestling to movies was like a huge, huge deal. And even I don't know if you read Ebert's review for one or both Mummy movies, but
I didn't. Go ahead. Sorry.
He specifically calls out that The Rock has equal billing with Brendan Fraser for what amounts to about 90 seconds of screen time, and he did not like the second one. He did like the first one.
He did enjoy the first, right? He didn't love the second one.
He called out that he said, "I think The Rock has a great career ahead of him, and I think after this movie, it's still ahead of him," which is a funny way of
very true. But The Rock's the Scorpion King, the spinoff, it made like $90 million. It did pretty well.
This was a huge franchise.
Yeah, and he got $5 million for The Mummy Returns. $5 million for whatever, as Roger said, 90 seconds of screen time, and that was a big deal. I remember, and that's so. Yeah, you're right. He does have like equal billing with Brendan Fraser.
He does, and he's really he's only in the beginning, and then it's more his likeness when he comes out.
Yeah, because it's all
Scorpion
CGI.
King.
And I remember even as a kid being like, "That looks like shit."
The two things I remember from this movie were the Scorpion King looked like shit.
Yeah.
And I remembered Rachel Weisz on a hot air balloon for a really long time. And on this rewatch, both of those things are still true.
Yeah, they're on that hot air balloon for like 30 minutes.
It is substantial time on a hot air balloon.
They make it feel like a little less because of the flashbacks and everything like that.
It's a lot.
It's a long time. No, it's a fucking long time. But it's interesting. Like, so let's talk about The Rock, for example. So for a guy as charismatic as he is, obviously as an actor now, but even in the ring, he was such a fucking force. This role was obviously a bit of stunt casting, and he definitely, he's a difficult face to forget.
Yeah.
But the Scorpion King is, obviously he did it because it's the money, and as well as like it's being part of a big franchise, but like. The character's fucking nothing.
He's a non-entity.
Yeah, he's not an entity. Which I'd be curious to revisit his movie, The Scorpion King, to see what that character is.
I don't remember any of that.
I don't remember it at all, but I did see it in theaters. I remember. I don't remember it. Literally, not even. I remember Grant Heslov as his like best friend in it, which is such a bizarre. Excellent. Piece of casting as well, but it's great. That guy went on to be an Oscar-winning producer with George Clooney, and he plays like the Scorpion King's goofy, side friend. Yeah, which is just hilarious to me. But okay, so The Mummy Returns. It takes place 10 years after the original. It's much more globe-trotting. There's parts in London and all around Egypt and everything. It kind of does everything that you expect big budget sequels to do, which is, up the action, up the stakes, and up the geography of everything. I remember it was weird. I was expecting to get a lot of like not only nostalgia when I watched it, but also like, oh wow, I remember all those lines. First of all, I remember the trailer better than anything, like the announcing the names and the music, which I don't know why. Yeah. And I actually got more nostalgic vibes from rewatching The Mummy than I did from The Mummy Returns. That said, I still enjoyed The Mummy Returns. I think the kid is really really good. I think that's good casting. Yes. I always loved John Hannah, and I think he's great as her brother. I liked the henchman. I can only pronounce his first name, Adewale. The black guy.
Oh yeah, that guy is.
He's always great. He's
great, and he does angry with without words so well. He just looks furious.
His face is awesome, and he's. What are you talking about? I missed with the knife is like it's awesome.
It's good.
And I feel like I appreciated the scope of it, but again, rewatching The Mummy, I feel like I prefer the Mummy because of how it's a great trick when filmmakers can make something clearly very big feel contained and easy to follow. Yeah. And I think The Mummy does that better than The Mummy Returns. I think the subplot with Rachel Weisz being like, "Oh, this was my past life," I just found that a little silly.
It sucks. It straight up sucks.
I don't think it's necessary. I feel like they kind of did that because it's like she has to die and then come back. I didn't like that as much. And again, The Rock as a Scorpion King in CGI is just, I just thought that was the dumbest choice ever. And it sucked. I don't know. I really didn't like that. I feel like they could have just brought The Rock as a Scorpion King back, but not have him be an actual scorpion. Like, he could have just been like, "Where's my bracelet?" I don't know.
I agree. I don't know why they didn't just make him wrestle Arnold Vosloo. Like, that would have been sick.
Right.
It looks like shit. I mean, I was hoping that time had been kind to the CGI in that last part where they have the fight, but it looks like it did then, which is like a PlayStation 2 cutscene.
Yeah, you know what's funny? You're right. It doesn't look any worse, but it
doesn't look any worse. It just looks equally as bad.
But it's always looked bad, and it's. I
was thinking it would actually get better because you take time into account.
Right.
But it's tough when the Scorpion King looks worse than the T-1000.
Yes.
And that's a 10-year difference.
Yes, it does.
In technology, and
that's
I think
James Cameron directing. You know,
but this is a big enough budget film.
That's true, and
it's a sequel, and there's a built-in audience here. Like you gotta.
Yeah, you do, and they still used ILM. They both used that. T2 and the Mummy movies used ILM, so that's for anybody that doesn't know, that's Industrial Light and Magic. Yeah. Basically, Industrial Light and Magic was, I think, invented with Terminator 2. I think they were the first.
I believe you're right.
Yeah, I believe they were the first major movie to use that service for visual effects.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like the Mummy in The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, I mean, it's not like it's like super terrifying, but it looks solid. It looks good. Like that CGI looks good. It looks cool.
And it's no less CGI, but it looks cooler.
Right. It looks cooler, and it looks more believable. It looks a little bit scarier, but the Scorpion King's a fucking joke because you're expecting The Rock and you get like, you know,
Uncanny Valley The Rock.
You get like The Rock in The Sims.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's kind of what perfect. It is.
Yeah.
And I think that it just doesn't play. But I still love the chemistry between Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, and again, I think the kid adds something. I think that Patricia Velasquez is smoking.
Yep.
And
I mean, her and Rachel Weisz knife fighting each other is pure ticket to Boner Town.
Oh my god!
But there's problems. Like they're fucking flying around on an airship like it's a low numbered Final Fantasy for like a fucking half hour.
Right.
Old people from the old movie show up, like the Magi guy, whatever his name, Ashton Gords or whatever the fuck his name is.
Oh,
their buddy,
Oded Fehr.
Yeah, he shows up.
His character's name. It's like Arnath or something.
It's something like that. But he has amazing hair.
He's great and everything.
Rides a horse.
He's the gigolo and Deuce Bigelow, male gigolo. He's the guy who Rob Schneider house sits for. But he's always great and everything. But I got to applaud the movie for. I like that it has an international cast. That stood out to me in both movies. I think more so in the second one, actually. I really like that. I like that they didn't do like brown face and stuff like that. At least I couldn't. If they did, I couldn't tell. But I don't know what Arnold Vosloo's racial makeup is, but he certainly. I think I think you could say he's white passing, but I don't believe he's.
I buy him as an Egyptian.
Yes, I think
immediately.
You know, yeah, right. But I think I thought that was a cool aspect about it, that like I appreciate it as an adult now versus like as a kid seeing it and just kind of having it come at you.
Yeah.
But now I appreciate like, oh wow, they really went to lengths to highlight that, especially in the trailer with all their names. I thought that was cool. Yeah. But I feel like I prefer the first one. So I will say for The Mummy Returns, for me, It's still good, but with a caveat. I think it's still good, but I think you should watch the first one first. I think you should watch them back to back because they're both equally fun and enjoyable, and they work. I think as an adult, they work better together than The Mummy Returns on its own. I think The Mummy original is definitely still good.
Well, all the character work is done in the first film,
Right.
so this one doesn't have that at all. I think you're out of your mind. No one ever needs to watch The Mummy Returns again. We can move past this one. It's the first time I remember as a kid watching a movie and thinking, oh, this feels like a sequel. Like, it's so thin. It's just an excuse to have action scenes, and the action scenes are fine. I liked how much gun violence there was. Yeah. There's a lot of bullet hits. There's like that weird thing where it's PG-13, so there's no blood, but there's a lot of violence, which is cool. Mm-hmm. But it is an excuse to have action scenes, and I find almost nothing about it to be that enjoyable. My attention was wandering hard during this movie.
Okay.
The only thing I really enjoyed was at one point, Brendan Fraser's doing exposition, and he says something along the lines of, "Oh, the Scorpion King's going to come back, and Imhotep's the only guy tough enough to stop him." And I really liked how they referred to Imhotep as like a guy that they know. I thought that was hilarious. Right. He's like, oh he's a pretty tough guy. You don't want to be around him when he's drunk, but other than that, he's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's when they're in the
car.
They
just know each other.
Yeah, on the way to the that is funny. Yeah.
But if you're
talking about a guy that went to college with.
Yeah, Imhotep, But if you're curious about what blockbuster movies were like 20 years ago, and especially if you're curious about how you're going to feel about Marvel movies in 20 years, watch The Mummy Returns. Because it's the exact same type of filmmaking. It's the exact same, relatively speaking, we're in the same neighborhood budget-wise.
Yeah.
We are kind of in the same neighborhood star power-wise. Yeah, and with The Mummy Returns, you've only got one movie to draw the character work from to string together these action scenes, where with Marvel, it's much more constant. There's a lot more going on. So this is what it's going to feel like to watch the Avengers in 20 years.
Yeah, and
I
think you bring up a great point, because The Mummy Returns is one of the first movies that I remember being of age enough to cognizantly say this is an event.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't so much a movie as it was an event. I remember it opened to $70 million, and that was like huge news.
Yeah, like unheard of, yeah.
It was huge news. It was huge money. Because keep in mind, this opened May 4th, 2001, before Harry Potter, before Lord of the Rings, before Spider-Man. Yes. Like, $70 million over a weekend was huge. Huge.
Spider-Man was 2002?
Spider-Man was May 3rd, 2002, and literally a year later. And on that same weekend,
thought it was 2001, sorry.
On that same weekend, it opened to 114, and the rest is that was the first movie to ever make $100 million in 3 days. And that's where the industry was going, but The Mummy Returns was like a big fucking deal because of that. And so I think for me personally, because of how, my whole history with it that I just described, I think there'll always be a little bit of nostalgia there. That nostalgia tinged to my answer. Like, I'm going to say it's still good because of that. But again, that's the point of the show, is that, like, that's the question we ask ourselves, is like, can we say something is good? Can we say something is good now just on its own, or can we only say it with a little nostalgia to it, or was it never good? It's like, those are kind of the three main questions we ask ourselves.
Look, as a 13-year-old, and I turned 13 on May 4th, 2001. There's no you're not able to understand that The Mummy Returns isn't going to be very good, right? It's an event. You have to go to it. You see it. Right. It gives you everything you want. You're like, okay, that was great.
Exactly.
If you get older, you're able to see, like, okay, this doesn't really have anything of substance here. It's kind of just a showcase for visual effects.
No.
It doesn't bring anything new to the character table.
No.
So depending on how much you're vibing with them from the first film is going to be how you feel about this one. This is just a thin Hollywood sequel. It's a summer movie. It's fine. I don't hate it. I didn't love it at the time. I don't love it now. It basically has not aged for me, which is more interesting than anything else about it.
That is interesting.
But the fact that it has a movie that it's a sequel to that is better and has 90% of the same cast renders it not a necessary rewatch, I would say.
That's a very good point. Because the Mummy is definitely what's been
everyone's better in the first one. Right. Everybody's better.
Right. And what was a nice surprise about this experience was rewatching the Mummy and realizing, oh shit, this is actually still good.
Sure. Like and Stephen Sommers is awesome. He can do action.
He's a good director. Yeah.
I don't expect necessarily more from him in this kind of situation where he's making a big budget sequel to a huge hit.
Right.
I wish the script was better, but in terms of visual storytelling, I didn't have a problem with it. It's just like, there's just nothing there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Mine's a soft, still good. Yours is sounds like a pretty firm, not good.
I mean, it's a tough movie to have a strong opinion about. It's just it's just there. I mean, it's a popcorn big tentpole movie.
Right. And I think it probably holds up a little bit because of the original. Like a lot of people remember the original and they're like, "Oh, this actually is like Indiana Jones for millennials," and this is pretty great. So any extension of that is going to get, I think, a fair shake for the.
I think it's going to get a lift.
It's going to get a lift, but I think you're also right. I mean, I don't feel the need to watch The Mummy Returns anytime again soon.
I can't imagine watching this unless I have a kid and he gets into The Mummy and then he wants to see the sequel. I'm like, all right, let's watch it.
Right, but I can see myself enjoying The Mummy every couple of years. It's fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Anyway, A Knight's Tale. So, A Knight's Tale opened the following weekend. It opened at number 2 at the box office, $16.5 million, just about.
Behind Returns?
Behind Mummy Returns, yeah, because Mummy Returns was so big. So the first weekend it made $70 million. I think final numbers were like 68.1. But then the second weekend it made another like 30 plus. And that was always going to be the case, considering how big it was. A Knight's Tale was never going to win. But it was a bit of an announcement of Heath Ledger arriving as, he can carry a film.
And also an announcement of Paul Bettany's ass.
Big announcement of Paul Bettany's ass. For a good minute of screen time.
Oh, they go proctology on him, which is wonderful.
Oh, yeah. So I remember when this came out. I remember the billboards. I remember seeing the billboards the same day I drove into New York to go to that Knicks game, seeing The Mummy Returns and A Knight's Tale.
It's like and I remember thinking, trip for you.
Yeah, and I remember thinking and I remember seeing the Rob Schneider billboards for The Animal. And I saw that in theaters opening day. Oh, you're welcome. But I remember seeing The Mummy Returns and thinking, yes, I want to see that, and A Knight's Tale just being like, no, that's not for me. And I actually had never seen A Knight's Tale until this first time that I watched it. Had you seen it? Did you see it as a kid?
I remember nothing about this movie. There's no way I didn't see this movie. I mean, I think this was like heavy rotation with Twister, and honestly, probably The Mummy Returns at like, that age where you start aging out of sleepovers, which is like 13 going to 14. There's no way I haven't seen this movie. I remember nothing about this movie.
But do you think you saw it because of your sister, or do you think?
So you think this is a girls' movie? Do you?
I kind of do. Yeah, that's the vibe I got.
I don't know how my sister feels about it. I didn't tell her we were doing this. Sometimes I get her perspective because she's 3 years younger, which is enough to where the stuff we talk about on the show can seem vastly different as far as what we both remember.
But what's interesting about the fact that I think it's a girls' movie or whatever. It's like it feels like it almost has to be because of the counter programming. Like
great point. Excellent. I was going to disagree, but I think that's a really great point.
Yeah, I mean, the studio probably was like, look, we're probably going to lose some of our audience to The Mummy Returns because it's so big, but it's going to make enough money to justify its existence because not everybody that's going to see The Mummy Returns is also going to want to see this, and everybody that wants to see this probably will not want to see The Mummy Returns.
Yes, that's a really, really good point. I remembered that Rufus Sewell and Alan Tudyk were in this, I would have definitely wanted to see it more than I did.
Mark Addy, it's a great cast.
Well, Mark Addy coming hot off of the Full Monty, baby.
Full Monty, yeah.
He's becoming a regular on the show, which I appreciate.
Yeah, we should get him on.
That'd be amazing.
That would be amazing. But yeah, I think this movie had a great cast. I think that everybody in it is great. I feel like you can see Heath Ledger's real chops in it.
Sure.
That said, I didn't like it. and I'll tell you, I'll get into why. But the biggest thing I felt was, I felt like the use of the rock music was nothing more than a gimmick, and I know that was probably the point. I know you probably read about it too.
Eber's review.
I get it. It's a good point, but you say the quote because you obviously have it.
He said people are going to make a big deal about the anachronism with the rock music, but orchestras hadn't been invented in the 14th century either, so it shouldn't freak you out that much, which is a hilarious way to look at it.
It is a hilarious way to look at it, and it didn't freak me out. I wasn't like, what the hell? Because I remember seeing on the billboards, "He Will Rock You," and I remember the marketing. I remember the commercials of the Queen song and everything. So I went into this expecting that, but I just didn't like it. I just was like, it just feels like someone deciding this and telling people like, yeah, this is just cool. But it felt like there was no reason for it. I don't know. Like, I feel like I don't know. I feel like music and film is obviously super subjective in terms of how it's used and things like that. But I think that when you're making a clearly stylistic choice like this, I guess I just wanted to know why. And you have that. What you just said is why. Well, look, orchestras weren't invented either, so he wanted to show how people felt about music back then, right? It's like, because an orchestra, you can't really express that feeling visually, but with a rock song you can. I liked the use of David Bowie's song "Golden Years."
I love that song. And
I love that song too.
I was absolutely peeking off my edible when that part happened, and I could not stop going bop 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 like for 5 minutes after.
That was cool, but again, in the beginning when they start playing "We Will Rock You," and then I started seeing the people lip sync. I almost feel like I would have liked it more if the characters in the movie didn't know the lyrics and the words.
The problem I have is more that they do it then and then they don't do it again.
With "We Will Rock You" specifically.
Yes, they know that song, and then they don't know any other song except maybe you could say "Golden Years."
Heath Ledger's lip syncing "Golden Years," but you're right.
They don't do it enough.
Right. Like, it's almost like you got to lean into it.
Exactly. Like I don't want this movie to be a musical, though that would kind of be interesting. But the classic rock hits they use throughout this movie, and that's one of the things I remembered the most about it. It's some of the least inspired shit I've ever heard in my life. If you're going to have the boys come back in town to Thin Lizzy's
when they get
The Boys
to London,
Are Back in Town.
Yeah, Jesus.
That would be a time to have the characters sing it for some reason. Because if you don't, that is such a fucking uninspired, played out choice. You got to fucking do something with that.
You're right. You do.
Flattest shit.
Yeah, it's by the numbers. I mean, it's like,
oh my God.
And especially in like shit that I've learned with making my own stuff is like, I remember I made this sketch. It was called Face to Facebook, and it was about people in a coffee shop fighting online and like on a Facebook thread, and they were all looking at each other but not saying anything and just typing all this shit. And I remember thinking it was funny, and like, you know, some people were like, yeah, that was pretty funny. You know, most people seemed to like it, but one of my friends gave me an interesting criticism. He was like, yeah, dude, I didn't love it. It wasn't your best. And I was like, okay, like, I was like, I always want to get better. Can you tell me why? And he was like, because you kind of did exactly what was there. Like, you didn't surprise us. And I was like, that's a really, really fair criticism. And I actually don't disagree with you. And so, to your point about the boys are back in town, and then you use the song, the boys are back in town, it's like, yeah, of course you do. There's nothing imaginative about it. And so when my friend said that to me, I was like, oh, fuck, he's right. Like, this was kind of directly what it is. Doesn't mean it's bad. I actually shared that criticism with some people, and they were like, no. They were like, I don't agree with that. I think it's effective. I think it's fine. But I think he makes a really good point. I think as a filmmaker, especially, you have to do things that are unexpected. I mean, you know, the short we just made, Marvin's Never Had Coffee Before. That title makes you think that it's going to be a guy who maybe like tries coffee.
I criticize you for that title, by the way.
You did, but think about it. the whole reason for that title is to kind of subvert people's expectations of like, okay, what's this going to be about? Is it being a guy who tries coffee and then tries drugs and all this stuff? No, it's completely not that. It's completely not that by design. And so I feel like with something like A Knight's Tale, the writer-director Brian Helgeland probably was like, I want to do something. I want to take a story that, you know, medieval story, but then put rock music into it or whatever. And like, I get that it's like, you know, that's a creative-ish idea, but it's like then he just kind of did that exactly, and the choices he made of the songs he used were like very typical choices.
They are awful choices. They are the most expected shit you could have.
Exactly. Like, he will rock you, and then we will rock you. And it's like, the boys are back in town. The boys are back in town. And then fucking, they're kissing at the end of the movie, and then Shook Me All Night Long plays. Yes. Really? Again, I think the only somewhat inspired choice was Golden Years. And,
yeah, very.
And that's because you know it when you hear it. You know it's David Bowie, but it's not like a typical, like if he had done, and I love this song, but if he had done Modern Love, that would have been a little bit more typical. But he didn't. Sure. So I got to give him credit for that choice of David Bowie. But like, it just kind of felt like, I feel like when you make a choice like that, again, like you really need, I don't think it's so much that you need a why. I think you need a strong why. And I just don't think his why was that strong.
No, of course not. I allegedly people really like this movie of our generation.
Oh yeah, people.
That
really
is like unimaginable to me. This is.
I agree with you.
This doesn't even get to the level of dad movie where I'd excuse a lot of expected down the middle shit. The script for this movie is awful. It's not fucking good. Terrible.
And talk about you mentioned your attention span waning.
Oh my god!
I was not into this pretty quickly. Like I knew pretty quickly.
Yeah,
this is not for me.
Opening scene, they start doing "We Will Rock You." I actually was like, "Oh, this is going to be a great time. Like this is going to be a fun movie to watch." That was wrong.
Yeah.
It is very, very cliched. It is extremely expected. It is extremely by the numbers.
Yep. Everything about it.
This is another movie where, like, if you're 13, maybe you don't understand that something that is this not challenging is not engaging.
Right.
This movie, I'll put it to you, I had a thought with this movie. I had two thoughts. One was this movie is the polar exact opposite of Barry Lyndon. Just complete up in every way.
I still haven't seen Barry Lyndon.
Okay, there's a scene where the love interest and her handmaid, or whatever the fuck, are indoors at night in her bedroom, lit by candlelight. And the lighting is coming from the ceiling because that's where the lights are hung in the studio where they shot it. And I called that out to Jackie, and I was like, where's the light coming from here? How is this lit? And she was like, you're such a film student, shut the fuck up. There's another scene where Rufus Sewell has to explain how jousting is scored. And I told her, this is what exposition is, where a character has to tell the audience what's happening.
I remember that too. When he's talking to Jocelyn about it, yeah.
Yeah, Jocelyn, whatever the fuck her name is.
And by the way, as if she doesn't know, she's been coming to these for what?
Yeah. She fucking born in the aristocracy. She needs a lowdown on scoring.
Yeah, if you're gonna use that as exposition, explain it to a character who doesn't know. She knows already.
Exactly. Like if you're going to the strip club for the first time, it's like, okay, you can look, don't touch, keep your hands down, sit in the seat, and they'll come to you. It's like, this isn't that. Like she would have already experienced this.
Right.
That drove me fucking crazy. So like the other thought I had was, if you're someone whose like top films include The Shawshank Redemption and Forrest Gump, you're going to shit your pants when you see this movie. You're going to love this like you've never loved anything.
Okay, why do you say that? Because first of all, I like Shawshank. I haven't seen it in a long enough time, but I remember loving it, and I've always thought Forrest Gump was overrated, so I'm with you on that one. But so why those two movies?
This is the most khaki pants down the middle, no challenges, exactly as expected, cliched shit you could ever see. If you legitimately really love Shawshank Redemption and Forrest Gump, and you find them to be transcendent experiences, you are going to love this movie. I am never going to tell you that A Knight's Tale is not a good film. You're going to be very attracted to this film. There is nothing here of interest. I don't know. I got to like the 40-minute mark of this, and I was like, how the fuck are they going to fill another hour. They've run out of shit to do. They don't have anything to do.
I felt that too, and I remember looking at my thing and looking at the task thing and being like, "Wow, you
gotta be kidding!
This is 2 hours and 12 minutes. Fucking kill me now."
What are they gonna do?
And not only that, I got to a point where I was thinking, all right, so it's 2 hours and 12. This is probably a pretty big production. So we're thinking, okay, like how long are credits going to be? All right, so it's really like 2:07. Okay, thank God. I was like, all right, it's really going to end there.
Bargaining.
Yeah, I was bargaining with my time. And I feel like this was a great example of something that is just not so much style over substance, but like,
no, where's the style?
Well, that's my point, is like with the music, that would have been the style. But that's my point, is like it felt like it was just a weird hodgepodge that just, look, sometimes this shit works and sometimes it doesn't. I was reading some of the reviews of it, and one critic said, A Knight's Tale will either repel you or win you over, and it won me over. And I was like, that's about right. Like, it repelled me. Like, I never want to see this movie again.
Right around the time Heath Ledger gets in a fight with Jocelyn for no reason other than we have to have tension to fill the runtime, I was like, I'm losing my mind.
And again, I feel like you can see seeds of Heath Ledger's, like, his depths.
He's legitimately good in this movie.
He's really good.
Sewell's great in this movie.
Yeah, I love Rufus Sewell. Rufus Sewell's underrated. But let me tell you something.
I love how his eyes seem to be independent of each other. Like, he just has an interesting face.
He does have an interesting face. That's true.
Love him as a bad guy. Love Alan Tudyk, Mark Addy, legend. Paul Bettany, early sighting. Get to see his ass.
Love Paul.
All good.
Always love Paul Bettany, and he's like the MVP, I think. But like Ledger, I mean, they all deserve better, but Ledger deserves better. I mean, like the fact that this was his kind of like heartthrob announcement. I get it, Look, and it did okay financially. Like, but it cost $65 million, and it only made 56 in the States. Worldwide, it made 117. So it made its money back a little bit. It was enough to be like, okay, Heath Ledger's bankable. But I think Heath Ledger was just such a nuanced, interesting actor, and again, I think it comes through here. Like, I didn't really care that much, but like the scene when he reunites with his father, that was a touching scene. That was good.
That scene plays. That's one of the
probably
few
like
scenes that definitely plays.
Yeah, it's really like I didn't care. I'm not even talking about the flashback stuff. I'm talking about when he sees his father present day.
100%. That is a great scene. It is emotionally there.
Yep.
The father is really, really good in that scene. I don't remember that guy.
I was going to say they completely elevate each other. They fucking bring it. And then when he shows up at the end and he's watching, that's great too. But yeah, that father, and what's weird is the father in the flashback I don't really remember as well as the father in the scene with him in the present, which is interesting. Yes. So it's clear that Ledger and this guy are just kind of working off each other really well.
And it's great. It's a little unearned because I don't think that the plot or characters up to that point actually deliver the emotional payoff through the script.
Right.
I think it's 100% the actors in that moment.
I agree.
Which
I
makes it
agree.
seem like it's out of a different movie, which is a little weird, but it definitely...
I mean, the fact that you and I just singled that scene out.
That was one of the only scenes I had that I really, really loved.
I think that was the only scene I had that I really, really loved. I guess Paul Bettany's intro was fun, but...
Paul Bettany's intro is good, plus, he's Chaucer, so you're like, all right, he's writing The Knight's Tale, but then they don't even really put that in as obvious as you would have thought.
I have certain scenes just kind of linger too long. Like when they tell him like everyone knows you're William Thatcher, they're gonna come to arrest you, and he's like, what should I do? And they're like, you should run, you should run, you should run. And he's like, should I run? Should I run? Should I run? And then he's like, no, I won't. And it's like, just what the hell was that? That was like a 5-minute scene. It could have been 2 minutes. You know
he's going to get found out the minute he lies about who he is because it's kind of a formulaic script where of course it's going to bite him in the ass.
And then of course when you see Prince Edward, he's going to save him.
Of course they're going to become buds. Of course, but it's not even that good.
Right.
It's not. It's because it's just it just sucks. It just like
it's formulaic. It's that's actually my main problem with this movie is that it tries to disguise itself as like, it's medieval, but there's rock songs in it. That's different. But first of all, it's the same fucking thing we've always seen, and the rock songs don't even add anything. They don't make it better. Again,
it's just a sports movie.
And I think I'm not saying that you can't do that and make interesting choices like that, but like if you're gonna do that, dude, do like a more obscure Queen song or a more like,
yes.
Dude, imagine the opening, instead of We Will Rock You, imagine the opening with like Fat Bottom Girls. Like that already would be more interesting.
I'll go even harder. Seven Seas of Rye would have kicked ass.
Right. Okay, so that's even more obscure. And it's like maybe instead of ending with You Shook Me All Night Long by AC/DC, I don't know, fucking like Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution, you know?
Pick literally any others. I mean, AC/DC
any
is
other.
tough because their shit too much. But
and instead of the boys are back in town, I don't know, pick a fucking Sympathy for the that's kind of typical too, but like pick a Stones song that's just like, because the Stones they do such a good thing where it's like their songs are like, you know, they announce that you've arrived. You know what I mean? Like they have such 100%. A sound to them that has that conjures up that feeling. And I think that would have been a good choice too. But like, look, obviously these things are complicated. Maybe he couldn't get the rights to certain things that he wanted. Who knows?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how hard it is to get rights to deep tracks. Those are really popular songs. You'd think that would command.
Yeah, and also
payout.
Right, and also they seem like deliberate choices, especially We Will Rock You in the beginning. They're literally mouthing it. This movie is a very strong not good for me. I never want to see it again. I actually kind of hated it the more I'm talking about it.
I don't like it. I now don't trust people who like it. I think this is a great movie to revisit if you think it was good.
I agree.
Because I think the bloom should be fully off the rose here. And I was explaining to Jackie, I think I brought this up on the show a lot, but I love practical stunts. Practical stunts will supersede awful scripts, characters, good, like anything. If you've dudes getting hurt on film, I am in. And I love horse stunts. And even that, like they're
such a random thing to love.
Love it. I love dudes falling off horses.
Someone's like, "Oh, we saw a great movie. We saw a great movie this weekend. Are there any horse stunts?" Yeah. I'm like, no, they're not. All right, forget it.
Well, I like old timey shit, and I love westerns. So I love horse shit in movies. I love that shit. And this
you love horse shit
movie, huh? Yeah, of course. Even the stunts aren't that good. I love seeing actual dudes getting hurt.
Right.
I love seeing the splinters fly around. That stuff looks cool. They
that was
slight research. They were using uncooked linguine to meet shards of wood. That's just great behind the scenes. That stuff gets me so excited.
That is interesting. That's cool.
But the stunt work here is a little slow.
Yeah.
You can see where they're speeding up the camera to make it look like they're going faster. And it's cool when they hit each other with the spears. But you're supposed to not be able to see it. The dudes who get hit are never aiming at the dudes who hit them. They're like always way off. Like it's not fucking close.
Yeah.
And it takes that tangible, holy shit, someone's getting harmed moment out of it, and it sanitizes the violence a little bit, which
and let me tell you something else. Let me tell you something else. Our last question about the movie. Let's leave it like that.
I'd like two things to add, but yes.
No, okay, fine. This will be my last question. Then you close it with the two things you want to add. Was it ever I feel like for a while, and maybe this was because my attention span was like what's the word?
Wandering.
Like running. Yeah, wandering. Was it ever unclear to you, like the rules of how somebody won these things?
No, nowhere near. You knock the other guy off the horse.
Yeah, but like I feel
whack him with a stick.
I feel like he got knocked and people were like, "Yeah," and then he got knocked again and people were like, "Oh." There were times when I was like, "Okay, who's winning here?" I don't know. Maybe I was like looking at something else for like a key moment, and then that just fucked me for the whole movie.
The bigger issue I had is like they're not that far away from each other, and it takes a long time for these two guys to run their horses into each other. So that I don't know. I had a moment towards the end of this movie where Heath Ledger takes off his armor. He gets pretty fucked up by Rufus at the end. He takes off his armor to joust armorless. And I had a moment where I'm like, if they kill him, if he gets fucking slaughtered by Rufus Sewell here because of his dedication to the sport, this movie's a 10. If he gets fucking through the chest murdered, I'll forget everything about this. Like, to make that the end of the film, like, this guy's so dedicated to this woman and this stupid sport of violence that it kills him. I know that's more of like a Kubrick take. I didn't really believe they'd go there, but I had like a 30-second time where I'm like, oh, they're going to fucking ruin his day, and this is actually going to be a good movie. Okay. I was wrong. That does not happen.
What's so interesting about that is that I didn't have that exact thought, but when he took his armor off and everything, and I actually had a similar thing of like, well, if they kill him, I definitely did not see that coming. Like
it turns into the wrestler. Yeah.
I had that thought where I was like, if they killed him, that would be. I definitely would not have predicted that. So I was like, okay, that might be pretty fucking cool. But you just kind of clarified, like, yeah, that would have been bad. That would have been pretty ballsy to end with.
It's not with. It would be so against the tone of the 2 hours that came beforehand. It would have put everything else in a different perspective, because that would be like, oh, this guy Hegeland or whatever, he intentionally made a bad movie to lure you in to make a point about how stupid sports and violence are.
That'd be amazing.
It would be amazing.
Really quickly, do you think Mickey Rourke died in The Wrestler?
I do, 100%.
Okay. I've been kind of, I've never really had a strong stance on it. I'm just kind of like, that's the end of his story. So I don't know.
Literally, because he's dead.
Yeah. I remember seeing it in theaters, I think with Odzio, actually, and he was like, oh, he's dead. And I was like, really?
Oh, he's super dead. Yeah.
I never was like, oh, he's definitely dead. I don't know.
His story continues, but it's 6 feet underground in a box for eternity.
It's like, that's a really fucking good movie.
Well, anything's better than A Knight's Tale. So yeah, this is strong no. I mean,
I'm with you.
I think this really, really deserves to be reappraised by anyone our age who likes it. I really think that if you saw this movie as a kid, you didn't realize, you weren't exposed to enough stuff to kind of see how bloodless and familiar all this was.
Right.
And now that's just written large all over the whole thing.
So here's the fun question. 2 versions of it. When 13-year-old self, which do you choose? Mummy Returns or A Knight's Tale? To see in theaters.
Fuck. Do you have an answer? I
have an answer for 13-year-old self and 33-year-old self, because I have an answer for both.
Christ.
Both for me, both is Mummy Returns.
It's certainly Mummy Returns now. I mean, that's a low fucking bar.
Yeah.
As a 13-year-old, I would probably go with A Knight's Tale, I think. I think
all right.
I think because A Knight's Tale didn't have the sequel feeling, I probably would have liked it more.
Yeah.
And I probably would have been sold by the story a little easier, and not been bothered by the familiarity.
But it's funny, like The Mummy Returns, I remember thinking like, this looks like fun, and it was fun. And I think it still is fun for the most part. It's not boring. I know what you mean. There are moments where I'm kind of like, yeah, all right, you're losing me a little. But that's the thing with like A Knight's Tale. It wasn't fun. I had no fun watching this movie. I was not enjoying myself at all. I was just waiting for it to end.
I agree with that. That's a good point.
Yeah. So I don't know that for me, that's easy. I think that's interesting that you would. I know. I makes sense that you'd say Mummy Returns now, especially after the fucking beating that we just gave A Knight's Tale. But it's interesting that you said that would take you. As a 13-year-old, you would think like, oh, I'd rather see something original than a sequel.
I don't.
That's very interesting.
I think so.
I got to give you credit for that, because that's kind of a nuanced perspective for.
I could be biased. My 33-year-old self could be biasing my past judgment.
Maybe, but I also think that like you're kind of I think original thinker. You kind of strike me. You've always struck me as a guy who like kind of is like you think for yourself. I still struggle with that sometimes. I do for the most part, but I also still sometimes. I remember as a kid, it's like you go with the masses. Oh, this movie's coming out. It's everywhere. Everyone's going to see it. I do too. As opposed to. But now I'm, especially with film, I'm much better about being like, I don't fucking have any interest. I'm not going to see that. Like Wonder Woman 2, Wonder Woman 1984. I'm not going to fucking waste my time.
I mean,
and first of all, I've heard nothing but terrible things, and I also just don't care. Like even
it doesn't bother me to hear terrible things, but yeah, I don't care.
Even if people said it was great, I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm going to see what I'm going to see. I'm going to watch what I'm going to watch. That's it. I mean, I think, especially as you get older, that's what it is. Well, anyways, guys, so that's Mummy Returns. Still good from me, not good from Bear. A Knight's Tale is a resounding not good from both of us. We hope you're enjoying our, summer movie season counter programming episodes. We're just going to clarify, we're going to break it up a little bit. It's not like we're going to be doing these types of episodes for the whole rest of the summer. We're going to break it up with food and some music and other things like that. Next week, we're going to be revisiting Sum 41's All Killer No Filler, which just turned 20 as well, which is fucking crazy. But we're obviously going to keep going with the counter programming. If you have any suggestions for movies you want to send us, shoot us a DM at Still Good Show on Instagram, or send us an email, stillgoodshow@gmail.com. Give us a subscribe and 5-star review on iTunes and other podcast platforms, wherever you get your podcast. We really appreciate it. I don't know. Do we have anything else to add?
I think that's it.
I think that's it. For Bear Kennedy, I'm Andrew Carter. That'll never make sense.
I love it.